two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it, I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
In today's episode of Project Recovery,
I start casually drinking. And slowly but surely, by the time I hit 40 years old, I become a fifth a night, blackout, neglected my family, drunk.
make sure you listen to the end. Find us on Facebook at Project Recovery. We'll have that and much more coming up. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's a podcast about recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt. It's brought to you by our friends at knowyourscript.org. You know, we're in the middle of an opioid epidemic, as long as a pandemic, earthquakes, gale force winds, all this good stuff. So we just want to make sure that you're prepared as best you can be. So knowyourscript.org, they're launching their new campaign, Dr. Matt. And when they say know your script, they say teach your kids about prescription safety. Learn more at script.org. Or they also want you to learn the right questions to ask about your prescription, Dr. Matt. And that's important. Why?
I think everybody needs to be a good consumer of their own health care. And if you don't ask the doctor what you're taking, you know, how can you have a informed conversation about it? So it's really important to go in, and whether it's for you or for your kids, and ask about alternatives. If they're prescribing an opioid painkiller, then ask if there are other options. There usually are.
You know how many times we've had on this podcast that people have got into their substance abuse by a prescription from a doctor. I'm not saying it's the doctor's fault, but also from people just helping out other people. So they want you to know a little bit about sharing prescription meds and how dangerous it can be. If it's not coming from your doctor, chances are you probably shouldn't be ingesting it in your body if it's to help you out medically, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. When, you know, some people, that's their culture and they like to share things like that, but don't do it. If you're finished with the prescription, you have some pills left. If you don't need them anymore, learn how to dispose of them properly. Take them to your pharmacy, police station, you know, drop off events, but get rid of them because you shouldn't have any left over to share anyway.
And you can find out all that information and more by going to knowyourscript.org. Now, before we get to our guest today, LT, and I'm excited because he's got an amazing story. And I'm often just blown away by how many amazing stories we have on this podcast every week. You think it would be hard to find somebody to talk about it. And unfortunately, it isn't. You know what I mean? There's so many people willing to share their stories. And what we found is when people share their stories, Dr. Matt, it really gives people insight into the mind of an addict. But more importantly, Dr. Matt, it gives people hope. And when people ask me what this podcast is about, that's the number one thing I always go back to. It's hope. That's what we can give you on this podcast is hope.
I hope, definitely. I mean, our guests provide that every week. It's so cool to be able to see that there's a lot of different reasons why people end up in substance abuse problems. So that blows up that stereotype right away. It's not just, you know, people wanting to be bad. Nobody sets out to have a substance addiction. And so anybody can be susceptible to it. But the cool thing is all the different roads to recovery, all the different avenues people have taken. And if they can do it, you can do it. It's pretty cool.
All right. Now, before we get to the guest today, Dr. Matt, I've got something that I want to run past you. We had a little incident at the Scott family household this weekend.
Uh-oh. Okay.
And I hope it's not going to be cause for my son to need a therapist. But in some people's minds, it might be.
Okay.
But, you know, under the direction of Governor Gary Herbert, we took his mandate close to heart. And I told my oldest she couldn't go out. I told my kids we're just going to kind of stay in. We're going to stay in our own little pack and we're going to do our thing. I said to my oldest, it's only 14 days. It's not going to kill you.
Right.
When you get back to school, you'll still be cool. You won't know what was going on for the past 14 days. But that's not true because you can Snapchat them and you can do all the things that technology is allowing us to do it.
Right.
So we're sitting on the couch. We're watching TV, Dr. Matt. And I don't know if you've got kids, so you know this. When you're sitting on the couch watching TV, everybody's multitasking. Everybody's got a laptop or
something.
In their hand.
Yeah.
So I made my kid sit through A River Runs Through It with Brad Pitt because it's just a great movie.
That's a great movie, but that's a drama. The kids sit through that. I mean, it's a fantastic movie. Robert Redford.
Yeah. They sat through most of it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. They were on their phones and looking through it. And when a cool part came out,
Legends of the Fall afterwards.
No, I didn't make them watch that, but I wanted to share a moment with them. And so then that movie ended. And they said, "Well, what do you want to watch now?" And I was like, "Well, let's watch something maybe a little exciting, a little dangerous, or something like this." So I'm scrolling through the TV, and up pops this thing. It says "Open Water," and I'm like, "Oh." And Preston goes, "Oh, I heard that's good." And I was like, "Okay." And I go, "What's it about?" And he goes, "Well, I think it's about people scuba diving and they get tracked down by sharks or something like that." And I'm like, check. This is cool. So I put it on and the credits are going and this couple's, all they're doing is packing, getting ready to go spend their time on this island. And only what I assume is going to go underwater to the sharks. We didn't get that far. And so I'm looking at my phone, playing a little online poker. Everybody else is doing their thing. And all of a sudden I hear my son go, "Oh!" And I look over, and his face is in horror. And I'm like, what is going on? So I quickly glance up to the TV, and guess what I see?
I don't know.
Boob. A boob in all its glory. I'm telling you, it was front and center. It's like that cameraman said, "This is the shot. We're giving you the boob." And it was a boob. Yeah. And so I go to get the remote control, like, I got to go up or down. I don't care. We just can't be stuck on this boob. And I couldn't get it changed fast enough. And his face and the boob. And then my other kids put up and they look. And next thing I know, I'm having a 15-minute conversation like Meet the Fockers saying, everybody's got nipples. It's okay. But in my head, I'm thinking, this is going to be one of those times that my ex-wife's going to call. "What are you doing over there? What's going on? How come my 9-year-old son's seeing boobs on the TV?" And I'm like, oh, man. And so I'm joking about it kind of now, but it was kind of a serious thing. And then I didn't know how to talk to my son about a boob, which seems kind of weird. But I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't think that we were going to have the boob conversation right then. Normally I'd go in with notes or a kind of a plan of attack and something to do, but I didn't have any of that. I couldn't even get the remote. And so now we had a conversation about boobs. And so I don't know what to do. I mean, I want to revisit it and go, "Hey, bro, remember that time we saw that boob? Do you want to talk about it?" But we haven't had that conversation yet.
Well, how did the conversation end up? Maybe you did just fine.
Well, he's like, "I don't want to see anyone's boob." And I said, "Well, that's probably the case for right now, but eventually that's going to change." I'm just, but, and I don't know if I said that to him, but I was thinking that. Yeah. And then I said, "Well, your sister's got boobs. Your mom's got boobs. I've got boobs. I mean, we've all got them." I said, "There's just, there's a time to see them and there's a time not." I should have looked at the movie, noticed it was rated R and they'd have nudity underneath it, but I didn't. And so my bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, did he, so to be honest, most of the time we don't get to plan out these conversations as parents because stuff like this happens and then we end up having the conversation with the kids. But I mean, honestly, I don't think that's the end of the world. It opens up a conversation. He's 9. And by the time he's 10 or 11, he's going to be starting maturation. And all of a sudden boobs are going to be a lot more interesting to him by the time he's 11 or 12. And so, having the fact that what's great about your household is I think your kids know they can talk to you about anything. And I don't think you need to revisit it right away, but you might come back to it again in a few months and just ask him, if you had any worries or concerns about it and talk to him about what's appropriate, it's a great conversation about the fact that as he changes and gets older, then, girls and sexuality will be more interesting to him. And you can just let him know that you're there to talk to him about it in the future when those things happen. And I think he'll be fine.
To be honest, I thought I would have gotten the phone call from the ex-wife already. Yeah. He would have gone home and go, "Hey, so how was your weekend at your dad's?" "We saw boob." but he didn't do that. So maybe it wasn't that big a deal to him as it was to me.
Well, he was probably shocked in the moment, but did he seem traumatized by it? Like,
no, not at all.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
no, no.
Yeah, so
I got him. I got him those headphones. I got him those headphones for Fortnite, so he's been pretty into that, and he's trying to get to the next level, which is the She-Hulk, and she can do some amazing things.
Okay, well, she's got boobs, probably. I don't know.
There you are, Dr. Matt. I guess.
Well,
yeah.
I think, just as an FYI, I think that, back in our day, parents used to say, have the talk, right? And the birds and the bees talk. And I think that's a mistake. First of all, most parents don't talk to their kids about it at all, which is a mistake. But then parents think of it as a talk. And the best thing you can do is have a dialogue, an open dialogue, talk with your kids about, sex, sexuality, nudity in movies, and what pornography is, and have conversations with them as they get older and their interests and questions change over time. So, it was a shocking thing, but maybe that opens the door to better conversations for the two of you in the future.
I like where your head is, Dr. Matt. Thank you very much. Let's bring in our guest today. His name is LT. I was calling him Leonard because when he reached out to us on Facebook, it says Leonard. And then when
I'm just going to say this. LT's cool. It's a little intimidating because it sounds sort of military-like, and he's got the big guns, and all that stuff. But, Leonard's cool, man. Like, how many people go with Leonard? Leonard is like a smooth-talking, cool guy. So I'll respect the LT. We'll call him LT, but Leonard's pretty cool.
Yeah, so LT, how did you get the name LT versus Leonard?
So my dad wanted to name me Leonard in respect of his father, right? My mother hated that name. And then my initials are LT, Leonard Ted. My dad hated it when she called me LT, and then my older cousins, 9-10 years older than me, caught wind that my dad hated it. They came over and painted it on my crib, and ever since then I've gone by LT. I moved to Michigan, came back, I actually became a 30-year-old, got a job on base, and tried to be mature, right? I'm going to introduce myself as Leonard everywhere I go. Started introducing myself as Leonard, but it just came right back around, and everybody started calling me LT again.
You know what? I've had a bunch of nicknames in my life, from Fun Pig to Corduroy Boy to just Helmet. And I can tell you the surefire way to get a nickname to stick is to tell people you hate it. If you tell people they hate it, then they're going to, oh, then that's your nickname. So you either just go with it. And I've done that a couple of times and they still stuck. So, all right. Hey, Leonard, LT.
Either one's fine.
I'll call you LT. Thanks for being on the program today. Let's find out a little bit about your story because I've talked to a couple people, and when you're in the recovery world, people will go, oh, you got to talk to this cat. He's got a good story. Or this guy, he's got a good story. And so if you hear it from enough sources, you go, all right, let's figure this out. So LT, what's your story, bro?
Well, addiction's my story. 2 times in my life I've hit rock bottom, right? In the early 2000s was meth, and then in the late 30s was alcohol. But I started when I moved out or ran away, whatever you want to call it. I moved out, dropped out of high school at 15. My dad moved us out to Michigan when I was 13. Back up a little more, at 7 years old, my parents got divorced, right? I didn't realize it until I do now, going through different educational books, but I was in an addictive household. My father was a very addictive person. Even though he quit drinking when I was born, his addictive mentality and all that still played a huge role in the family dynamic. So when my parents got divorced, my dad was highly manipulative. We wanted to live with my mother, but somehow manipulated into living with my father. And he still, to this day, in his late 60s, is an addict. And after all my experiences and research, I see where he is with that. But so we move out to Michigan at 13. I'm confused. I walk in. He holds me back a grade in high school, or 7th grade. I walk up and I meet my teacher. And I walk up and the teacher says, well, hello, Ted. And I'm like, Ted? My name's LT. Here goes some more name stuff. I look up at my dad and he's just like, go with it. So he takes me out of this state, moves me across country. No, I don't know a soul. We have no family out there. Changes my name, holds me back a grade. And something that day just kind of clicked in me, like, that's where Ted was born. That's my addict, right? Leonard's the good angel, Ted's the bad angel, and LT's stuck in between. And at 15, I drop out of high school. I work at McDonald's. I buy a car from my science teacher. I lie, I get an apartment. and I haven't been back since. But I started experimenting with weed, crank, acid, and I'm doing all kinds of drugs, right? I end up getting in a bunch of trouble out in Michigan, go to jail a couple times for theft. And my brother in Utah calls me, and I'm about 18 years old at this time, calls me and says, get back to Utah. What are you doing? So I go drive all the way back from Michigan to Utah, and I get a job. I live with my brother, and I'm doing okay, making $10 an hour doing sheet metal work and stuff like that. But the partying didn't stop. That's the only thing I wanted to do. And so I just picked up where I left off in Michigan with my old friends here in Utah and just started drinking every weekend and partying. Any chance I got was a party. I didn't care about work. I didn't care about responsibility, period. And then along came crystal meth. So I started doing meth. It was funny because I'd gone through a bunch of jobs. Like I said, no responsibility, just a maverick out in the world running wild. And I started selling Kirby's door to door and found out that I was really good at it. I studied the art of closing, and I was selling 30 plus vacuums a month. So we were making a lot of money. Yeah. And so to keep up, it takes all day to sell a Kirby. You're not just out there for 10 minutes. And
no, I've actually had a Kirby person in my door, and it took me 8 hours to tell them no. They're like, wait, hold on. My boss is going to come down. I think we can get you a better deal. Hey, bro, I just wanted the free room you said you were going to clean, and now I made you dinner, and I know everything about your family. You've got to get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty high pressure. But I was selling 30 a month, and that's when meth got introduced, and we started sniffing meth in the back of the van. And it just gradually progressed, right? I didn't care about drinking. I didn't care about smoking weed. All I wanted to do was meth. I was smoking meth, sniffing meth, eating meth. And eventually Kirby's went away, right? And I'm just in the circle of Ogden down here in the dark meth circle, hiding in basements, staying awake for weeks at a time. And
let me ask you something real quick, LT, before you get into this, because I think some of our listeners might be curious. When somebody tries to introduce meth to you, what is the approach? I mean, what since you're a salesman, what is the hard pitch to meth?
You want to get real high? Do you want to stay
and is that all it takes?
Yeah, you want to try something better than Coke? If somebody's already dabbling in something and you can see that they like to get that high, what's the next level going to do but make it better? In my opinion.
So you leveled up and you started taking meth, and that by that point, you're no longer selling Kirby's. You're in the seedy underbelly of the meth community in Ogden. And what year was this?
About 2001, 2002-ish.
And how did that go?
Well, I start committing crimes, right? So I ran out of money. I had a nice car. Tranny went out. It got repoed. I'm just doing whatever I can do to survive as far as meth goes. We're robbing cars. We're robbing anything, anything of any type of value to give to a dope dealer to get a couple grams or less even, to make it through another couple days high is what I was doing just to, commit more crimes. Eventually this led me to stealing a checkbook. Well, I had a backpack full of checkbooks. And the whole story is my buddy he didn't want to do meth anymore, so he joined the Army and deployed. And I ended up squatting in his house. And I had his checkbook one of the times I got arrested for something stupid like a traffic ticket that I didn't take care of, and it was a warrant. And being the silver-tongued devil that I am, I bailed myself out of jail with his stolen checkbook. Now, this is back before credit cards were very popular. And they don't take checks, right? Bell's Bondsman's cash only. But I talked this guy into taking this check. He takes it. I bail out. And his supervisor, the guy that owned the Bell's Bonds company, caught wind of it. And I ended up on the run from this guy. He's basically telling me, if I see you flinch or move, I'm going to shoot you. And so my plan was and I kept running. He was 2 steps behind me. And my plan was to catch a train here in Ogden, take it to Vegas where I was going to get picked up and just stay on the run. That was a great idea. But somewhere in between there, my brother gets a hold of me. He caught wind of what was going on because this Bell bondsman was searching everybody and everything for me. He says, you better thank Mom. She just paid that guy and got him off your back. So that immediately stops the run. And what do? I go back to committing crimes. Me and my buddy, right? We break into this house. We steal a computer. We steal all kinds of stuff. This happened right before I went on the run from the Bell's Bonds. Okay, so the story kind of intertwines. So we robbed this house, and we've already sold the the meth, or sold the computer and all the other valuables we could find. We have the meth. I end up on the run from this Bell's bondsman. And while I'm on the run, I'm actually at one of my cousin's house, and I'm looking for camouflage clothes, right? I'm on the run. And the Social Security card falls out from the burglary we committed. And so that's how I got caught with the burglary. I end up off the run from the Bell's bondsman because my mom paid the ticket. So I go back to the house where the dope is. And we're sitting there smoking, and he's acting all crazy. You know, he's like, "You got to get out of here, dude. You got to get out of here." And then finally he's like, "Dude, leave." So I get in the car with his girlfriend. We back up out of the driveway, and 6 cop cars surround me, guns drawn, get me out of there. And I'm like, "Hey, I took care of that. The Bell's bond, you know, I had a receipt and everything." They take me in, and it's for this burglary. And I had no clue the cops even knew about it, but it was because of the dropped Social Security card. And so this is
why
what
you wanted the camouflage clothes?
I wanted the camouflage clothes because I was literally like running across fields from this Bell's bondsman.
I just wondered where that came into play. I didn't know if you would have been able to fake the cops out with the camouflage, but I thought that was a fun part of your story. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries.
All right, before we get back to your story, just editor side note: never commit a burglary with your Social Security card in your pocket,
or somebody else's.
Yeah. Okay, so now you're surrounded by 6 cops. You're with your buddy's girlfriend, and they got you.
They got me. So I pull the meth out of my pocket. I drop it in her car. I get out. They take me to jail. They put me in an interrogation room, and they do the whole thing. Where were you this night? What happened here? And I just broke down. I confessed. I was sick of the game. I'd been on meth for a good year and a half. And anything I do, I take on, you know, just like any addict does, 110%, and just ran myself right to the bottom as fast as I could. I'm in custody. I write a whole confession. They take me to jail, and I do about 4 months this time in jail, going back and forth with the cops and a lawyer. And they let me out of jail, and I'm on probation. I'm in Ogden, and I relapse. I start doing meth again. And this time I'm with these 2 big black guys. We're in Ogden on Monroe, and we're walking. It's about 2 a.m. Undercover cops just surround us out of nowhere. And I had a pipe in my pocket with some meth. And they just rolled up, took our stuff, took our names, gave us tickets, and that was it. And they left. And so I went to my probation officer, and I was like, "Hey, I'm fighting it. You know, that was racial discrimination. I was with 2 black guys playing, being a drug addict, playing any side I can play." And she's like, "Okay." So she didn't take me to jail at that point. But I didn't go back to using meth after I'd gotten caught that time. So I was doing stucco. I just started doing construction. I was trying to appease the courts and my probation officer. But while I'm doing stucco, I'm smoking pot every day. Probation officer a few weeks later calls me in, take a drug test. I fell from marijuana, cuff up, right back to jail. So and I do another 4 months in jail this time. So I violated my probation. It's a 2nd-degree felony for that burglary. I'm looking at 1 to 15 years in prison. And I'm scared to death, right? I'm begging for one more chance. And so this point in my life, something happened. I got scared straight, I guess you could say. Something changed within me. I was in jail. I read the Bible from Matthew to Jude every night for 30 days in a row. And then I leveled up to level 4 and got out of jail, and they sent me to NUCCC. It's the nuke program here in Ogden, I'm sure you've heard of. I do 4 months in that place, work release. I become the manager of a Sonic restaurant downtown. I complete that. I go back to doing stucco after I get out of the NUCCC. I steadily climb in responsibility. I buy a house. I get married. I have a child. And I'm doing good, right? And the day I get off probation, what did I do? I start smoking weed again because all the stuff that I learned in the nuke program, all the stuff at NUCCC, all the drug classes, even the aftercare portion when I was on probation, I don't remember a thing about it. I don't remember anything about 12 steps. I don't remember anything about being taught what an addict is, the addict mind, addict thinking, the allergy that it talks about in doctor's opinion. And so I just start smoking pot. And I'm smoking pot.
Wait, stop there. So if you don't remember anything that you learned, did you remember anything at all? What were you doing that whole time you were going through the program? Because when I was in recovery, Dr. Matt, I saw some people do this, that they were just going through the motions. And therapists would know when you were just going through the motions. They would be like, right. Hey, you're here. Because I got accused of it like the first 30 days when I was in recovery. They're going, I see you. And I go, yeah, I've been here the whole time. That's part of what rehab's about. And they go, no, you're just hiding in plain sight. You're not doing anything really important, but you're here. Is that what you were doing, LT?
No, I took things very seriously, but whatever they were telling me wasn't sinking in as far as the addiction goes. I was obeying the rules. I went through 4 months at the NUCCC with 0 write-ups, and this is a place you can get write-ups for walking on the grass. I had a great job. I was excelling at everything I did. I passed every drug test. I took it seriously, and I can only give credit to the fact that I was scared to go back to jail. The 1 to 15 over my head in prison, I was that close. It scared me to death. And I never...
But why wasn't it sinking in? What, I mean, if you were doing so great, why do you think it didn't sink in for you?
I have no idea. I remember sitting through counseling sessions, but I don't remember them or me relating. I look back at it and I'm like, okay, at this point in my life, I was like, well, I had a drug problem. I got mixed up with meth. I screwed up. But I didn't come out of there going, I'm an addict and I can never use again. That connection never hit. You know what I mean?
And I think that happens a lot, whether it probably wasn't on your conscious mind, but your unconscious mind was saying to yourself, I need to get out of trouble and then I can use again. Yes. And so, you, like you said, you're 110%er, like a lot of addicts are. And you were like, okay, I'm going to do this program 110%, no violations. If I set my mind to something, I can do it. But there wasn't any internalization of what was really going on in your life. And so that subconscious mind kind of insulates you, creates a sort of detachment from reality well, I'm not really an addict and I can handle things. And so that probably was tucked back in the back of your brain, just waiting for that day to get the green light to be off probation.
That sounds spot on, because the day I was off probation, I've got weed and smoked weed. And then I smoked weed
on the very same day, right?
The very day that I was released.
Yeah.
Dr. Matt, when we were in recovery, and I remember this one guy goes, you're one of us. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I see what you do and I see how you look at everybody else and you don't think you're one of us.
Right.
You are one of us. And that sometimes is the matter of, a lot of times in recovery here, it'll just click. And then you go, but I remember when he goes, you're one of us. You're not better than us. You're not worse than us, but you're one of us. And there's so many people that go through this. And LT just said it. He goes, I kind of got in a bad place. When anyone says I kind of got in a bad place with meth, they're not. Any place with meth is bad. It's not kind of.
I danced. I had a little dance with meth.
Yeah, and if you're running from cops and you're looking for camo gear to run through fields and not get caught, that's not a kind of thing with meth. That's a pretty big deal with meth.
That's a huge problem.
Yeah,
LT gets the distinction of being our first guest that thought he could solve his problems by finding camo clothes.
But that's the craziness of the addiction, that to him, he was smarter than everybody else. He's like, you know why these guys are getting caught? They don't have camo. I've got camo. I'm not going to get caught.
Right. Yeah. No, it's insight, man. Like that's all real behavior change comes from real insight, like owning and understanding who you are. And so nobody wants to be told you're one of us by a bunch of people that are addicts, right? But that's the key to being free from your addiction, is being able to own who you really are and what your problems really are, whether it's addiction or anything else in life, And so, yeah, I'm sure LT, you were killing it on the surface, but underneath the surface, you were just holding it back until you got the green light.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. It's brought to you by our friends at knowyourscript.org. For more information, go check them out. We're going to be right back and hear a little more of LT's story.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That is Dr. Matt Woolley. We are broadcasting from our homes via Zoom. So sometimes you'll hear us talk over each other. It's not because we don't respect or want to hear what the other person is saying. It's just because this is new to us. Technology is a little crazy, but it's allowing us to do our show from our homes. And we feel it's important to be doing this weekly. But let's get back to LT. So last time we left LT, he had went through a bunch of programs, seemed to find great success in them, found himself a wife, had himself a kid, bought himself a house. But the day he graduated probation, he went back and bought some weed, and that's where we are now. Where does your story go from here?
I didn't ever go back to meth. I didn't drink because for some reason I didn't care about drinking, but weed was my thing. And so I'm doing construction. I go back to the construction company doing stucco that I was at when I first was smoking weed and broke and violated probation. And him and I run this company, and we get very successful. We're making a lot of money. We're building huge houses. And I worked there till about 2008. So from about 2004 to 2008, I smoked weed daily. I got the box. About 2004. I got a box, the little one hitter. I make sure it's constantly full, morning, noon, and night, just like cigarettes, with cigarettes as well. I'm smoking weed just to get through life. I can do everything better when I'm high. And my body's kind of getting tired of doing stucco. It's hard. So the only reason I quit doing stucco is to get a better job in the commercial world. So I get a job at Swanson's. It's a stucco supply chain. I become a sales rep there and a delivery driver of their, I get a CDL. So it's like I'm climbing the little ladders out here in the construction world. And that's the only reason I quit. I quit smoking weed. And so I gained a bunch of weight. I quit smoking weed. I quit smoking cigarettes. And I was there at Swanson's for about 2 years. And now here's where the story gets kind of cool. I get a job up on base, right? I got a 2nd-degree felony, been on probation. I got meth and weed in my record. I get hired in the F-22 program up on base in 2010. Luckily, I've been clean from weed for a couple years. I'm out of shape. But guess what? The base, you get paid to work out. Well, back then you did. You got paid to work out, 3 hours a week. So I get really into fitness. I'm doing good. I got a great job. I got a secret clearance, right? I was just completely open and naked up front with the FBI the 4 times they interviewed me. And I excel. I'm 110% at anything I put myself into, but I'm still an addict, and I didn't know that. So I took workout. I got addicted to working out, even though it looked good. It was healthy. I was fit, And I did that for about 4 years. And then at about 33, 34 years old, I start casually drinking. We'd take the boat out, and I'm not talking about a nice big boat, just a little tiny boat, and we would just troll up and down Causey fishing, and I'd drink a 6-pack of Corona, and no big deal. And then my buddies would come over. We'd have a 12-pack of Corona every other weekend or so. And slowly but surely, by the time I hit 40 years old, and there's a story in between this that's a real heavy hitter, I become a 5th-a-night, whiskey-drinking, blackout, neglected my family drunk. So it goes from that casual drinking. Like I said, I didn't realize I was an addict. I didn't realize I had the phenomenon of craving. I didn't realize, that I had the obsession of mind, and it just slowly took over. Had I had paid attention and internalized it, like you said, doctor, maybe I wouldn't have started drinking casually. In 2017, so by the time 2017 hit, I'm already drinking about a pint of whiskey a night. I go to work, I hit the liquor store, I come home, I drink a pint, and I'm maintaining, I'd make sure not to buy any more than a pint because I'll drink more than a pint. And I'm like, I got this, it feels good. I come home, that's how I relax. On the weekends, I can drink as much as I want. And that's kind of how it went. 2017, my son Link, gets in a severe UTV accident. He's 9 years old. We live in Pleasant View. I'm on my second house, second wife, and I got 2 more kids. And he's 9 years old. I come home early from work, and the kids had this little UTV. It's like a little dump truck bed. Maybe it goes 8 miles an hour, full speed. But him and 7 other kids, they would just putt around from neighbor's house to neighbor's house in this little thing. We thought it was cool, had speakers in it. But this day, on the 17th of May in 30th of May 2017, they take it up the hill, up this huge hill by my house. They turn around, they bring it down in neutral. They get going about 30, 45 miles an hour and flip it. It popcorns 7 of the kids out, and my son Link, who's 9 years old at the time, gets drug underneath the machine. The machine lands on his head. The back tire lands on his head and splits his skull open from ear to ear. And I'm at the house on my computer. I just cracked my pint, right? And it's like 2 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon. I took one little sip off of it, and bam, 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 the door, my oldest boy, Dad, Link's hurt. And so I take off and I run over there. The machine's tipped on its side. I come and as I'm approaching the machine, I see it tipped over on the side. I look over. My nephew's to my right. He's got a bone sticking out of his leg. His arm's broken, and an arm breaks in the middle, and it looks like he has a joint in his forearm. He's over here screaming bloody murder, dripping blood off his leg. I come around the machine, and I see my son laying there. And my sister had just happened to pull up. She's a nurse, just happened to pull up at this accident as it happened. So she did CPR on my son, and I got there right as she finished CPR, and he comes to, like, just choking on blood, blood coming out of his ears, his nose, his mouth, his eyes. Just a horrible traumatic experience we went through. So I flip him over, and I'm trying to drain all the blood out of his mouth because he's choking. And I'm like, squeeze my finger. And 3 times he squeezed my finger. And in the distance you can hear just sirens, woo, woo, just slowly getting louder, 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 louder. And there's just cops and ambulances. There's 7 kids. One of them's got his bone sticking out of his leg. My son's like, laying on his head with his head crushed. The other kids are up there. One's got his split. I have 3 boys. So my oldest son, he tucked and rolled. He was fine. My middle son, he must have did like a scorpion. He cracked his T9 vertebrae, and then Link, he crushed his head. And so I'm sitting there with him. The cops help me, and we load him up in an ambulance, and we drive to McKay-Dee. We go from McKay-Dee, we life flight to Primary Children's, where we end up living for another couple months. And we stayed at the Ronald McDonald House. And this kind of gave me permission. I had a drinking problem. I'm not trying to deny that. And I'm not saying that this is the reason I drink, but it gave me permission to take it to the next level. Every night at the Ronald McDonald's house, I'm sneaking in whiskey and I'm getting drunk and I'm screaming at God, I'm freaking out. And we don't know if he's going to live. We don't know if he's going to die. At one point, even they brought in a doctor and was like, we have to fix his face because I'd have to show you the x-rays, but they had to put his face back together. And it was like, he's like, it's healing in place. But in order for us to put his face back together, we got to put a trach and a feeding tube in him. And if we do that, you're going to sustain life in this body. And you may have to take like this home, and like points at him like a vegetable, like we have to take this home. And so this weekend, we want you to consider pulling the plug. And that was probably the heaviest point of my life ever. And my wife and I just kind of broke, Excuse me.
Take your time.
Okay. And so we make it through that weekend. And Monday we come back in, and they called in the big doctors, the doctors you don't normally see, the guys that are the super smart ones. They started a book on him and all that stuff. And he comes in and he's like, we were able to lay him down because they ended up having to remove his skull to let his brain swell. He's like, we were able to lay him down long enough to get an MRI because they couldn't lay him down without his brain just like, blowing up and swell. And they're all, we looked at it, and you know how a brain is and how it can shear. He goes, it's bad. It's not quite as bad as we were predicting, but it is bad. And then he went over and he pinched him on the trap. And he kind of gave a little flinch. He's like, let's give this little guy a chance. And that was just the biggest relief in my life that I've ever felt. But after that, my drinking, I don't know, it just gave me permission to become a fifth-a-night raging alcoholic. So from 2017 to August 2019, I was drinking a fifth of whiskey every single night and gallons on the weekend. I was a blackout, belligerent drunk. I was neglecting my family. I neglected my wife and having to take care of my son when he came home from the hospital, still with a feeding tube in him. And whiskey just took me to the darkest place I've ever been. And then August 19th, I'm sitting in my motorhome because the family doesn't want to be around me. I don't have any friends anymore that would want to come around because when it's drinking time, I'm drinking until I'm belligerently blacked out drunk. And I call my dad. I had drank somewhere around 3 to 4 gallons that weekend from like a Friday to a Monday. I had missed work again. I was missing multiple Mondays and Fridays in a row, barely struggling through a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at work. The supervisors are realizing, hey, what's going on? It's obvious to the outside world at this point I have a huge alcohol problem. So I call my dad. I'm belligerent drunk. It's 10 in the morning, and I think I just finished a fifth. It might have been a half gallon. And I said, if you don't take me to the hospital, I'm never going to be able to quit. Because I had tried. I tried to wean, I was like, I'm going to drink a pint tonight, a half a pint tomorrow, and just keep cutting it in half until I'm done. But there was that allergy I didn't understand, and there was that phenomenon of craving I didn't know about. And as soon as I took a drink, it was game on. The weaning was out the window. The pint was gone, and I was browbeating my wife either to take me to the liquor store or I was drunk driving going to the liquor store.
LT, let me ask you this, because, when I was in my heavy drinking days, much like you, I try to do it myself. And I would have those conversations with myself in the mirror. I would sit down and have pep talks. And I would say, this is what we're going to do. We're smart. We can do this. But you said it so eloquently there that once you had that drink, all that was gone. But the thing is, you believed and wanted to stop. You wanted to cut down. You wanted to do that. And so it was like taking a knife to a gunfight. There was no way you were going to win this battle with the education and the knowledge you had. Because Dr. Matt, I'm telling you, I did. I would sit there and I think I'm a fairly smart man. And I would have these conversations in the mirror, and I would lay out these plans, and we're going to do this, and this is not going to happen. And okay, yes. And we're both agreeing. Yeah, this is going to be great. And then I'd have a beer. And then it was like, I'd wake up the next morning and be like, what happened to the plan, man? We had a plan. And after you have that first beer, you're right, that plan is out the window.
Exactly what happened.
So you call your dad. Say, Dad, take me to the hospital. If you don't, I'm not going to beat this. Now, this is your dad who is still an addict by your own accord, right?
Absolutely. We don't get along.
And what did he say to you?
What was your dad's DOC?
Right now, it's like anything get his hands on, Adderall mostly, and weed. He's an upper guy. He was an alcoholic back in his 30s, but now in his 60s, it's Adderall.
Okay.
But when you tell him, take me to the hospital, what does he tell you?
I'm on my way. He gets it. He sees I'm hurting. He still loves me. We still love each other. You know what I'm saying? So he's there. Johnny on the spot picks me up and takes me out to Bountiful. I can't remember the name of the hospital off the top of my head right now. But I'm sorry.
South Davis, right? Isn't that the hospital there?
Lakeview, I think.
Oh, Lakeview.
That's it.
Yeah, Lakeview. And so I walk in there. I'm belligerent, right? I'm belligerent drunk. I'm hitting my vape in there. I'm like talking crap to the nurse. Like, how much do you make? Just being a belligerent prick. And my dad's telling him, hey, we need to check him in. He's got a huge drinking problem. It's been going on for years, and we got to get him detoxed. Because I was afraid to, after everything I'd read when I was sober, wanting to quit having my pep talks to myself, to go through DTs or have the seizures or any of that kind of stuff happen. And I figured I need medical attention. And so I'm trying to get in there, and she says, you're too drunk. You got to, go sleep it off for a while and then come back. So my dad, instead of taking me home, he posts me up in a hotel and just sits in a chair and waits for me to sober up. And I pass out on the bed. My wife shows up later. I basically called her earlier that morning. I'm going to the hospital, click, and it was a relief to her in a sense. She's got a whole huge story about it too, because she had to live with this addict as a non-addict. So I sleep there. She brings me food. I go back in. I check in 4 days in detox. I have a little bit of the hallucinations at the very, very beginning, but for the most part, it was the biggest relief of my life. A nice quiet room, food on demand, just TV, quiet, and I wasn't drinking. I get out of there and I'm clean, my head's clear, and I could not go back and take myself to the base. At this point, I've been there 10 years, and I just could not go back to that place. So I text him. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm not coming back until I'm fully ready. And I've been hiding in a basement for 3 years, playing on my computer and drinking whiskey. I'm a vampire. I'm gray. My enzymes are through the roof. There was a point I had my enzymes checked. My enzymes, my doctor told me, if you don't quit drinking, you're going to die by the time you're 50. And so my buddy calls me and he's like, hey, this lady wants me to build her a deck. I said, I'm on my way. So we build this deck. And now, in retrospect, a year and a half later, I look back and I took pictures of this. And it was the day I was it was the week after I was out of the hospital. I tore down this old deck and I built this nice, big, huge new deck out of redwood. And it was almost a metaphor for where I'm at in my life right now. Because at that moment, I was out in the sun, I was working hard, I was sweating, I tore down something old just like I did in the hospital, and then I was building something new. I go back to work after I build this deck. I made the money to replace all the, the month and a half I took off. And then I check myself into a rehab center, an IOP, intense outpatient program. And I'm there 5 days a week, 3.5 hours every single night for 5 months. I work steps 1 through 5, but at 47 days, I still don't think I have a problem. It's still inside me that I don't understand that I am powerless, correct? So 47 days, I go buy a half a pint of whiskey. I stick it in my top drawer. I said, I'll drink that when I want to. And I'm not going to drink any more than that. So I take the family out. We're happy. I'm 47 days clean. Things are looking better. But then I put that pressure right back on my family. Boom, there's a bottle of whiskey. I take him out. We go to Javier's. I get a nice big full belly of food. I go back to the house and we're about to watch a movie. And I'm like, now I'll drink it because I'm in control. I drink it. Nothing happens. I don't go crazy. I wake up. I got a small headache. I go back to my IOP and I tell on myself. I said, hey, I drank last night. 47 days. If you look at my key tags, you'll see it goes white, orange back there. And I get grilled. In this IOP that I'm at, every Thursday they have family groups. So my wife and children and a bunch of other families show up. And we're sitting there and one of the ladies calls out my wife, hey, how do you feel about LT's relapse? And I'm just like, crap. At this point, I'm still like, it's not a relapse. I just proved I'm in control. Still not realizing it. 2 months in. And the counselor is chewing on her for buying into me, for all the lies, the addict lies that I tell. And then he's chewing on me for putting that pressure again on my family after everything I've taken them through. And then he looks at me and he says, let me get this straight. You checked yourself into a detox center because you have a drinking problem. You're in an IOP because you have a drinking problem. And now you have to drink because you want to prove that you don't have a drinking problem. And it just logically clicked at that moment. Like he hit me in the face with the hammer. I was just like, oh, this is so stupid. And it clicked right then and there. And I made a churn that it sunk in past that subconscious that you were talking about earlier. And I haven't looked back. I jumped into the steps. I did steps 1 through 5. I transitioned February of the beginning of this year. And, I did step 5 with my sponsor. I've continued to do the steps. I joined SOAR. I did their 90-day program. I've got over a year under my belt now, free from alcohol. Meth was back in the early 2000s. And now I get it. I read the big book. I've read The Steps We Took by Joe McHugh. I'm reading a book called It'll Never Happen to Me by Dr. Claudia Black. I've studied the book Staying Sober by Terrence Gorski. And I get it now. I have an allergy. I cannot touch alcohol or drugs or my life's over.
You know what? You're not the first person who said that to me. And first off, congratulations, man. It seems like you're doing good and you're working your steps and you're figuring out what your recovery looks like to you. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm sure Dr. Matt does as well. When people, because I've heard people refer to their addiction as an allergy before. Can you explain that to me just a little bit? because I mean, I get it and I don't get it. It just seems like a softer way to say I've got an addiction problem.
So the allergy, and all I'm going to do is pretty much regurgitate the doctor's opinion. If you're allergic to strawberries and you eat a strawberry, you're going to break out. I'm allergic somehow. Don't ask me scientifically the pinpoint of the molecule, but I take a sip of alcohol, I'm allergic, and I'm not going to quit drinking until I get my drunk on, until I get fully good and passed out drunk. And I'm not the person that can drink a half a beer at dinner and leave it on the table. If I have a beer at dinner, I'm going to drink as many as we can while we're at the restaurant. And if you had a beer and you leave that thing half full, I'm going to look at you like you're crazy and I'm going to drink it.
Oh, I'm the same guy. I would have done the same thing. I mean, I did that so many times, leaving a restaurant, I would leave some beer in there and walk away, and I would get to the door and I was like, oh, I forgot to tip. And I'd go back and throw a couple extra bucks down and hurry and drink that drink because there was something in my brain that would not let me leave that beer on the table.
Right.
And, so I get that. So that helps with the allergy thing a little bit. Dr. Matt, have you heard of that before?
Yeah, sure. I think at this point in scientific research, it's more of a theory than it is, that we can pinpoint the actual allergy that a person has. But we do have biological predispositions, which is a different way of saying the same thing, and that some people are predisposed biologically to have a reaction, which is like an allergy, to substance abuse, things that are mind altering. For some people, it might be limited to just something like alcohol, and the other drugs aren't really an issue. For some people, it's everything. So, the addict brain is also just sort of a metaphor that we use for the same sort of idea. But the most important thing, regardless of how you choose to perceive it, is that LT and others recognize that's a biological hook. It makes me powerless, just like as if I had eaten something that I'm allergic to. You can't, if you're really allergic to strawberries, you can't think it away. It's going to take over you, and you need some time before you get, the allergy out of your body. So it's a great way of looking at it. I think it makes sense. And, obviously LT's story, he proved over and over again that he was allergic. And, the best part of it is that, like you said, that final therapeutic conversation you had in that setting made a change in your perception. And one of the things I end up talking with people about probably every day is that our perception determines our reality. There's a change. You said it was a click, and that perception of insight, all of a sudden, boom, you see the whole world and more specifically yourself differently and realize, I can't ever touch that stuff again.
Absolutely.
LT, okay, so I think the listeners would be curious. How's your son doing now? Because I can't imagine that, having to be put in that situation where they go, you might want to think of pulling the plug. How is your son now?
So it's 3 years later. The right frontal lobe is dead. He's blind out of his right eye. He can't see. He can only see peripherally, and his left ear is deaf. He also, because of the shock wave that's sent down to his pituitary gland, has diabetes insipidus, which means he can't flush sodium. So he's on DDAVP twice a day the rest of his life to control that. His brain damage, he has a TBI. He forgets quite regularly. But it's a miracle. The timeline of that story and the way that it happened, my sister showed up CPR. I came over, flipped him over, and drained the blood out of his mouth. A few seconds later, a doctor in plain clothes shows up with a bag and starts doing suction. This doctor in particular is a local doctor over in the North Ogden area. I took Link after he got out of the hospital to say hello and give him thanks. Thank you for being there for my son during the accident. And this doctor said, I cannot wrap my medical mind around why he's alive right now. So as far as how he's doing, most people, when they talk to him, don't realize he even has a TBI. You have to be around him probably 3 or 4 days in a row to see the glitches that he has. It takes a while for a new habit to catch on. He's in junior high now, 6 different classrooms, right? If they change his schedule, he'll revisit those other classrooms for about a week until it kicks in. His memory is almost a day behind. Will he live with us the rest of his life? We're still not quite sure yet. I'm worried about him turning the stove on and forgetting. But other than that, the child he was a super introverted kid, a little engineer kind of loner before the accident, right? That boy died. He's no longer here. He has a brand new personality. He's completely extroverted now, completely in your face, shaking your hand, telling you jokes, and he's doing great. I mean, he's happy every single day, smiling, laughing, making everybody else laugh around him, and he's living a really great life.
That's amazing.
So now it's a miracle. I mean, I'll call it what it is. I mean, that's a miracle. And they do happen all the time if you stop and pay attention. Are you still with your wife?
Absolutely. She hung with me through the whole thing. And if you want to talk about what we do, she offers support to women or anybody who have had to live with addiction and understand what it means to be sucked into co-addiction. Her becoming an addict of my addiction, watching the bank account, watching where I'm going, wondering what I'm going to do tonight, who's going to show up at the house, walking on eggshells and that kind of stuff. And she went through therapy, and she would suggest everybody as a family, we call it family recovery because we recover better together. And it's not just me that had to recover. My wife had to recover from what I put her through, and then my children as well. So as a group, as a whole, as a family, we recover together. So what does life look like for you right now, LT? The best it's ever been. If I could have had this head on my shoulder 20 years ago, right? So on top of addiction, the eye-opening, the click, the awakening, the perspective change of my son's accident and realizing the average life on earth is 72 years, and I only have, if that's true, 30 some odd years left, Lord willing. I'm going to live this last half of my life for people to be proud of, something that my children will be proud of. Basically, I think about what would it be like if you wrote your eulogy and your addiction? Would they have to scrounge something up to say good about you? I'm going to rewrite it so when they write my eulogy, people in the audience were like, that's absolutely correct. He did all those things they just said. And I want to do it to be happy. I want to live life happy. I'm not going to allow other things in my life to bog me down that are not important. I don't know. I see things that are important now that weren't important before, and the things that I thought were important are not now. You know what they call that, and Dr. Matt's a therapist, and he'll point that out, but I jumped on the mic first. Perspective. You got a good perspective of what life's really about. And so many times we have to go through trials and tribulations and bad things to happen to find out truly what matters. And it sounds like you found what matters to you. Absolutely.
I want to know, I have a question real quick. So you're dealing with what we call intergenerational addiction. Your father is an addict, you're an addict. What do you do with your kids now? You've got several kids. How many kids do you have?
I have 4.
4 kids. So you've got 4 kids, that's 4 human beings that are at much higher risk for addiction than the average person who doesn't have that direct lineage of addiction. So how do you as a parent talk to your kids about it? What do you say to them?
They came to group therapy with me. I'm completely wide open about it. I sit and we read recovery together. My kids can actually quote the 12 steps. Where I kick myself is my 2 oldest boys had to be, 11 to 16. Today's my oldest boy's 16th birthday. Awesome. Happy birthday, Amos. They had to live with my addiction in that age range, and now they live in Washington with their mom. One of them left while I was still a full-blown alcoholic. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to, he sees my life change from a distance, but I haven't had to have those good conversations. My oldest son, his disposition towards addiction is huge. And I just try to instill the seeds and plant and hope I can get it in there somewhere. My 2 youngest, 9 and, or 12 and 9. Link, I'm not worried about. He's the one that was in the accident. He's going to be fine. Millie, I have to just keep planting the seed, help her understand what addiction looks like, and just try to be the best parent I can now. And in retrospect, what I've been through.
Yeah. So in recovery, like this podcast is a way for me to give back to those who gave to me when I was in need. What are you doing to give back?
I also do a podcast. Recovering Addict right here is live 4 days a week. We go Sunday night, Wednesday night, or Sunday night, Tuesday night, and Thursday nights. And then Saturday morning, I run the school podcast, which is Dustin Hawkins. So I produce his podcast for him on Saturday mornings. On top of that, here, my studio is located at SOAR now, and I'm running their social media, and I'm a life coach with them Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturday mornings. We do our workout program, and then we have our group sessions. Since then, I've gone to a couple college classes and gotten my peer support specialist certificate. I quit the base. I started this as a nonprofit, and everything in my life right now is about creating awareness and giving back as much as I can.
Well, it sounds like you're doing wonderful things. Dr. Matt, any parting notes?
Yeah, I want to know what we need to do to have his wife come on and talk. I think that would be interesting to have her not only tell her story, but to, encourage some of our listeners who are in a relationship with an addict.
She would be happy to. Just say when.
Okay.
Man. See, that's the biggity-biggity-o. Never disappoints. I love it. You guys are rocking and rolling. Thank you for stopping by today and being on the podcast. If people want to find out more about your podcast and your YouTube channel, where do they go, man?
RecoveringAddict.org.
There you go. And don't forget, Project Recovery is brought to you by KnowYourScript.org. There's an opioid epidemic out there, and they want to help out. And when they say know your script, that means talking to your doctor, talking to your kids, talking to your friends. For more information, go check them out. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.